Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to York Chats with the Stache. I am Austin the Stache, and joining me today, two wonderful guests back on from times past. Barry back next week. How about that?
I feel quite honored to be on 2 weeks in a row.
Dr. Sue Crawford,
Thank
Mayor
you.
Barry Redfern. How are you two doing?
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having us back.
Of course. Happy to have you guys back, especially there is a big talking point happening all around York, and I'm sure most people who have listened to this in the past have heard about Project Access York and have had many opinions on it, to say the very least. That has been kind of the hot button topic here in York for a couple months now. So let's start off with, what was the beginning of Project Access York? What was like the need, and how did this come to be for those who are new to the area or,
Sure.
Haven't heard the whole story?
Sure. There are a couple of starting points. One is in 2006, the community did a comprehensive plan, and at that point indicated one of the needs of the city was to address how unsafe it is for kids to go across the street when they come and stop at York for different athletic events and other things. Then in 2017, there was a street community planning again, like what do we want to see in the future of York? And a component of that plan was to complete the trail system to really provide better access for people of York throughout. So in 2021, when the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act passed, the call went out, do you have any infrastructure projects that your community would love to see, but you don't have funding to do them yourself? And so I pulled that plan off the shelf and turned it into a grant proposal. That's where it started.
So this was a long time coming.
Yeah, and I mean, there was a walkability study done a few years ago that involved a lot of different groups in the community, just showing that, people needed better access to work, to schools, to, grocery stores, to those kinds of things. And, trails, we've had these other trails for about 40 years, and we've struggled to add much more to them because, it's hard to find those dollars in your budget. So when Dr. Crawford came and said, hey, we've got stuff to put out in grant, can I apply for this? It was like, absolutely. Why would we not? And, York was blessed to be one of two communities in Nebraska to receive $15.6 million, Lincoln being the other one. So quite a large chunk compared to the usual grants we get.
Sure.
This one had a lot more zeros on it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that came in 2022.
Okay.
So we heard that we were awarded in 2022. Then we went through all the processes and initial planning. And then in 23, there was an open house to gather more ideas about Project SS York, and continued to be engineered. And then in 24, this year, we had another open house and got input. So it's been in this process already for about 2 years.
And so with this process, from where Project Access York started to where it is now, what kind of what are the major changes, and what are the things that are staying the same from where it started to where it is now?
Well, I mean, I would just throw in, I guess it started with just getting a lot of members of the community, the school, the chamber, the county, the city, a lot of people together to decide, what were the important factors of what needed to be connected. We had put certain things that were in the grant, that had stood out. The bridge, access to the interstate area, making it safer to have people, on foot or bike travel that way. So we had that gathering, then we had an open house kind of where they used kind of just rough markers to say, hey, let's take it from out here, and it needs to loop around and hook up with the schools, and it needs to hook up with the university, and it needs to kind of try and join our existing trails that we have. So that was kind of just a rough drawing, and then the council, at that point, we approved working with an engineer. It was prior to that, because the engineering company that we hired helped us through that, and then they did preliminary engineering to say, how do you fit something like this into an existing community?
Sure.
I mean, and it's not easy.
Yeah, not a small undertaking
No,
by
I
any
mean,
means.
it's a huge challenge.
Right.
You go like, how do you fit all this in?
Right.
If you had a bare piece of ground, it's a lot easier. And, and that's the same thing that's happening out around our interstate area. Here it's developed over, 40 or 45 years, and we're trying to make it safer. There's new businesses that we have right now that are coming in, some remodeling or additions. And, how do you make that whole area safer for people to get around on foot and in vehicles?
Sure, absolutely.
So the technical answer of exactly where we are is we recently completed the public input portion of the preliminary plan. Mm-hmm. So there was a preliminary plan, public input on that, and from that preliminary plan, there are three main changes that we're making. One is to maintain parking on at least one side all up and down Nebraska Avenue. So one of the concerns that we heard on the preliminary plan was it did have areas of Nebraska that would have lost their parking, and that was very important to many residents. So we changed the preliminary plan to make sure there's parking at least one side all up and down Nebraska Avenue. And then the second thing is adding a few more safety measures where the trail crosses 21st Street and South Grant Avenue. And then a couple more trail access areas that people pointed out. We had long stretches of the trail and needed a few more places for people to get on the trail. So those things are all changing. The piece that's not changing from the preliminary plan is that it runs along an abandoned railroad corridor, because that is the safest place to run the trail for the rest of the community.
And so this all came from the conversations that y'all had at the open houses, and this was public input for this, right?
Correct.
And with that, what were those conversations like to balance not just like, okay, so we've got this grant money, we're putting it towards this, because when I said earlier this is a hot button topic, I mean, There's some very strong emotions tied up into this. What were some of the open houses like? Were they, for the most part, civil, for lack of a better word?
Well, and I think one of the things that I'd point out, and I do understand that change is hard, and I do understand for some of the people that feel like they're more directly impacted, that it's not easy to have something happen that maybe you don't agree with, or and the change of having something, maybe losing a bit of your property. But again, as we said, it has to go somewhere, and our job is to try and put it in the, in the absolute safest places that we can. But I think what's important is that it wasn't all negative comments. We had 50 some people that were asking questions, or maybe could be termed that didn't like certain things. But we had 30 some that were all just positive. And I would also say, most of my comments, that I've gotten when I've gone to groups and talked around the community has been, more positive, much more positive than negative about all the good things this will do. Obviously the most heated part of this whole thing has been the stretch between 21st Street and hooking up kind of to Nobes Road, and how we do that with the people that live along Grand Avenue and going back behind their properties on what Dr. Crawford said, the old railroad right-of-way. And we do understand, I do understand their concerns. I do understand what bothers them about this whole thing. It's just, I think I feel, as along with the engineers and other people that look at these big projects from the state and whatever, that it's the best place for it to go is on the railroad right-of-way.
So we had the open house, and some people got questions answered there, and then people could turn in forms with information, and then afterwards we had that available on the website as well. Any way that people turned in information, whether it was an email or paper form or written in crayon, however it got turned in this input window, those were all collected and put together, and with the help of the engineer, we analyzed what those most common themes were, and then talked to the council about those and gave the actual comments to the council. And then we continued to talk about the project. And then with the help of the engineers and Nebraska Department of Transportation, we created an actual letter response to everyone that submitted
interesting.
comments.
So everyone everyone that made a comment got a letter back.
So I wrote 124 letters.
Holy cow!
That then had to go through all the approval processes.
Sure.
So it wasn't until just early September that we were able to send those letters back out to people to let them know that we heard what they said and here was our response. So
that's wild. That's a super important part. Like, people want to know that they've been heard.
The thing that's so different about this grant is being a federal grant. We talked to people from the federal transportation department last week, and how important and how difficult it is to when you're not used to working with federal grants, and how good it's been that we've had the Nebraska Department of Transportation, representing us in a lot of matters and looking at the finances of this project, helping work with our engineers that are on this project and doing everything for us. But it is a project that's big, and sometimes it's a little hard to grasp. It's the biggest one New York's ever gotten by far.
Yeah, for sure. And so what are the next steps moving forward? What's the timeline for all of this look like? It feels like it's going to start ramping up pretty quick here.
Well, it ramps pretty fast, from the standpoint of it ramps fast and takes a long time at the same time. But on Thursday,
a lot of hurry up and wait.
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
And there's just a lot to be done to, as we said, to deal with a federal grant. So on Thursday, the council needs to go ahead. The council, I would mention, approved, acceptance of this grant, having Olson Engineers as our engineers and the contract with the Nebraska Department of Transportation. But that was for the preliminary engineering. Now we're at a point where we have to do the next stage of engineering on this project. And so that's what the council has to vote to go forward with. And that's what's on the agenda Thursday.
So the next steps of engineering and identifying properties and negotiating with property owners will take a lot of 25 and 26. So the expectation is that construction will probably begin in 27. We have
and
to
be finished in 28, right? I mean, it takes that long.
Yeah.
Yes. We have to obligate the federal money in 26.
Gotcha.
So that's why we have to keep moving along, because we have to keep on this track and you think that it's a long time, but they keep saying we got to keep moving.
Right.
So we need to keep moving because, doing all of the right of way and the next stage of engineering, all that takes quite a bit of time. And as Dr. Crawford says, we may be bidding this project somewhere in early 27 with construction starting then and finishing in 28. So,
right.
It's maybe 3 years from right now before anything's even gets going.
Right. And so on Thursday, what's happening on Thursday again? And how can people be involved, notified, all that sort of stuff?
So on Thursday, the next phase of engineering will be authorized by the council. So like I said, we've already agreed to the first phase of engineering. This is the next phase. If you want to continue this project, we need to pass the supplement to authorize the Nebraska Department of Transportation to work with our engineers on the next phase of the project.
Gotcha.
If the council were not to vote to go into the next stage of engineering, the project basically stops, and we would forfeit the grant. And also, we would have to pay back some dollars that we've spent that's been part of the grant to this point. So,
gotcha.
As I just think, it would be a real shame to give up these kind of dollars that would never, we'll just never be able to find these kind of dollars in our operating budgets from year to year. And it's just a once in a lifetime opportunity to do that bridge out there, which I think, there's a lot of things that go on with this project that aren't just this one stretch, the safety around the schools, the access to, continuing our trail system and kind of a loop, the bridge that's going to create a bunch of safety that's got, I think, will become a new entryway into York and really be a neat center point of that whole area as we're working on redeveloping and increasing, roads and sidewalks and everything out there. But there's just a lot more to this than just, 1 8-foot path that's going by, there's a lot to this. And so I just guess the big picture sometimes, when you're in tough decisions, sometimes the big picture outweighs what happens in a certain situation to a few people, and I sympathize when people are upset. I mean, I wish that we could make everyone happy all the time, and it's just impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally understand that. But so Thursday is the council meeting to decide on moving forward. I mean, assuming that's gonna just happen. I mean, the team seems to be the way things are going, and when it comes to people finding out more information about Project Access York, where are the places to go? What is the best way for people to have their questions answered? Are you just constantly writing letters at this point? What's the best place for them to get information?
So we have a Project Access York section of the website. And we put it at the very beginning. If you're on
the city's website,
on the city's website, thank you. So there's a Project Access York component on the city website, and there you can get all kinds of information and see more about the project and where the preliminary maps were going, and that's the best place to start. Mm-hmm. And we usually also we put little news stories on the very front page of the website. So the easiest thing to see is you can see the story on the front page, and that'll link you to more information as well.
There you go.
We've been trying to let people know, as yourself, the radio station and also the newspaper and just Melanie have all had articles on it. So, and we've let the council know last week. So hopefully the word's getting around for the people that would like to express an opinion and be part of that.
Absolutely. There's plenty of information out there. Everyone's being as clear as possible. So if you have more questions, those are the places to go for it. Is there anything else to mention about Project Access York before we head on out of here? Fantastic. Mayor Redfern, Dr. Crawford, thank you so much for joining me on York Chats today, and we'll have you back another time.
Thanks so much.